All right, I think we're live. Hello, everyone. Greetings from sunny Madrid here in Spain. I'm very excited to welcome you to our keynote session on how to create a learning culture within an organization. My name is Marian. I have the pleasure to be the host for this exciting talk with these fantastic speakers. And indeed, we have a strong lineup. Happy to present it, but also feel free to ask questions, right? Feel free um, to put your comments, your doubts, your uncertainties around learning in the chat, and we'll make sure that we consider it within the time frame. And before we dive in, please take a moment to ensure your devices are on mute if that applies, to minimize the distractions. And this will help us create a focused and engaged environment, well, to learn from each other, right? And with that said, I would like to welcome and present our guests, starting from you, Pash. Pash is Head of Learning at KPMG, based in just outside of London, United Kingdom. Welcome, Pash.
Hi, Marian. I'm delighted to be here, and thank you so much for joining us this afternoon.
Likewise, thank you. And moving on with you, Toby. Toby is a Senior Learning and Development Consultant at CH Robinson, based in Eindhoven, Netherlands. Welcome.
Thank you very much for having me. Yeah, looking forward to it. As you can tell, I'm not Dutch from the accent, but I've been living over here for a long time, so I'm half Dutch, shall we say. But now, very much looking forward to this this chat.
Glad to have you on board. And I'd like to greet you, Vanessa, your advisor and mentor at Symmetrical, based from Barcelona, Spain. Welcome.
And other companies. Yes, thank you. Thank you very much for having me here. I'm really looking forward to the conversation.
Nice to have you around. All right, let's kick it off with you, Vanessa. So, coming from your experience, what would be the most effective strategies for fostering a learning culture within an organization? And it would be great to give us some examples of these strategies implemented.
Okay. Well, I was when I was thinking about this question, I was thinking that it's better to start with what makes learning relevant for an adult. I mean, like in this Pash, I'm sure that Pash has something to say about this. When we are older, the way we learn is when something is relevant to our context, is relevant to us. So in order for designing and sort of like creating a learning culture, the first thing you have to do is to understand what are those key skill sets, capabilities, knowledge base that you need in each of the different roles of the organization. So I would say that before delving into strategies, we have to understand what is the context in which we are working and really what is necessary for people to learn. So having said that, once you start designing the strategies now, and you were asking what I've seen in my experience that worked. Well, first of all, it really helps if learning is one of the values of the company. And I think that newer companies, or like, let's say companies that have been created more recently, have made learning a part of their culture. And they do, second strategy, very important, communicate that frequently and effectively. And third element, and absolutely fundamental from my point of view, is the involvement and commitment from the top leadership. Like, as you know, culture is always top down. I mean, you can try to do it otherwise, but if we think of a company as a whole, it's normally top down. So it's absolutely essential as a strategy that they are seen, not only say, but seen, committed to that learning environment. So I would say number 4 or 5 would be having quality tools and a quality platform, let's say, and particularly quality materials. I mean, all of us, I think, have sat through horrible computer-based training that the only thing it is like screen after screen of things thrown at you, and that is supposed to be learning. That is not really learning, So I think it's absolutely fundamental if we want to create a learning strategy, that learning is made easy for the person learning. Because we are all in organizations that we're always very busy. We're normally pressed for time, and we need to make space for that learning. So relevance, as I said earlier, and quality are absolutely fundamental. And something that I think is also very important is creating a knowledge sharing environment. It's like making sure that people feel that they can contribute and they can ask their peers for information they don't know and make it safe. You know, that because you don't know something, you're not going to be seen as someone that is not valuable. It's just like, you know, we all know different things. So it's good that there is a reference, and that's why the Good Knowledge platform is important, that you have people and you can find what people within the organization can help you with that information that you're missing, or with the skill set that you're missing. And also, very importantly, how you search that platform and find the right information and the right tools at your fingertips without having to spend hours trying to find what's relevant for you at every single moment. And I could go on and on, but I'm also conscious of time. So I think I'll stop it here. And I would say that in my experience, the best knowledge platforms I've seen and the best learning cultures I've seen have been in professional organizations and in some, I would say, startups / scale-ups that I work with. And the reason why they were great is not only because they applied all of these strategies I was mentioning earlier, is because they really was fundamental for their business model to make sure that people were up to speed with information about a client or learn about something absolutely fast in order to deliver correctly the service to clients.
Wow, thank you, Vanessa. Great insight, enablement, leadership, platform, some key words. She gave us a broad spectrum of what a strategy should include in order to be both effective and efficient, right? And adding to that, and also expanding the scope, Pash, when we first met to introduce to each other, you've mentioned that learning agility is a key focus area for you. And I wanted to ask you, how do you enable that in your at your job, and above all, how do you develop this competency in employees and team members?
Great, thanks, Marianne. And I think just to lean on what Vanessa has mentioned, it is all about context and making sure that our people are sort of supported and given the right tools to pivot. So we all know, our world is changing. What we need to be doing as leaders and learning leaders as well is creating an environment that really empowers our people to, adapt and respond to the changing environment. I mean, we've all heard the scary stats, from the World Economic Forum that, robots and AI are going to replace 85 million jobs by 2025. So, you hear all those scary things, but really does happen though, is that, jobs will be created to work with, robotics and AI. So, what we need to be doing is making sure that we upskilling employees so that they can learn how to learn and be able to respond and pivot to the changing environment. So what I've seen works really, really well is actually creating almost faculties of learning as such, and one of it being strategic accelerators. So if we see that the business is going to be changing in the next, 5 years and it's moving towards more AI, machine learning, robotics, we need to make sure that our people are able to learn those new skills so that they can future-proof that business strategy as well. So learning agility really comes into play is how do we respond as a learning organization? And, some of the challenges that we experience is that learning can't move fast enough, that the business needs to be moving to these changes. So we need to make sure that, we act quickly as learning experts so that we can support our people as they pivot to the new world of work. Yeah. So just a little bit about that, Marianne.
And Pash, sorry that I intervene here. Sorry. Something that I forgot to mention earlier, and I think it goes also straight to Pash's comment, is that you must hire people with a learning mindset from the beginning. That really helps creating that agility that Pash was mentioning within our organization and the adoption of the learning culture.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
Sure.
And I think it's important that it's the number of times that you see in the learning environment that people are scared for their jobs and those kind of things. But I find that as a learning professional and in the learning profession, we don't spend time to develop ourselves and the skills we need, like Pash is saying, to kind of get our own knowledge up in terms of AI and all the other technology that's coming out, so that then we can then be best prepared to support our customers, whoever they be.
Absolutely. Toby, we've thought so far, we've considered a bit more the top-down approach, talking about learning strategy, right? How to create strategy and agility and enable the people. But let's switch, right? Let's do it vice versa. In your experience, how can organization foster a bottom-up approach to learning and development? Why is that important? What's your experience on that?
Yeah, I mean, so Vanessa, you spoke very clearly about the top down, and it's not like I disagree with you. I agree that it needs to have leadership understanding what a learning culture is. But I've always been of the belief, I am the belief now, should we say, that it's more important to get the bottom up strategy right, and that the leadership then mirrors that. I don't know if that mirrors is the best way of putting it, but for me, it's about if an individual can understand their own strengths and weaknesses, they understand their position in their career, they know which direction they're going, they're very self-aware, they're curious, again, to what Pash was talking about, they understand what they need to do. And then obviously the communication is clear from the leadership, from their manager, to know what direction they're going, what are the strategies, etc. Then I feel that you've got a much better environment to support. I know that a lot of people talk about the gig economy, this future, that there is in the future, there'll be no such thing as roles, that you will have a set of skills that you'll be able to support individual projects as they go on. I don't think we're anywhere near that yet. I think probably some companies are doing well at that, but as an industry, we're just nowhere near that. But in order to get to that place, I think that's the direction we're going. Rather than role development, it is skill development. We've heard a lot about that. So as an individual, if I can empower myself, or if I'm empowered, should I say, to be able to develop myself, then no matter where I go, I can deliver what I need. The quote I always love to use is Richard Branson. I don't think he originally came up with it, but I like to quote him, that you should train people to leave and engage them to stay. And I always love that quote, because I think we should be thinking about career development rather than individual personal development within a company, and then understanding that learning mindset yourself and empowering your own learning journey is then, for me, the best way to go.
Absolutely.
Totally makes sense. Pash, are you back with us? Do we have you on board?
I was boring you that much, Pash.
No, I was like flipping. But I'm back now.
All right. So I see a discussion in the chat, or more like comments around psychological safety. And basically all agree, also with a few likes, that this is an important factor in creating a learning culture. And
well, that's the key foundation to a learning culture.
I would like to share some insights how to foster psychological safety. So Pash, Toby, Vanessa, how would you actually enable that? Maybe Pash, you can start.
I think a very important piece, and it really does start with the leadership development and leadership skills. And I think it's an important piece. It's a leader at all levels, so not just from the top down or looking at that piece, but looking at all levels. And really what we need to be doing is focusing on, I guess, the opportunity that you get from learning and growth, and not focusing rather on the failure or the mistakes. So that happens, mistakes do happen, but it's how you, as Toby mentioned, having that, my apologies, that learning mindset, having that growth mindset, learning from those mistakes and moving forward. One of the key things that I've always considered, when we share this with leaders, is listen to understand, not to respond, so that you support your people, you nurture your people, so that they have that opportunity to feel safe, and you've built the trust with them. So I would say less blame, more encouragement, more support, and getting them to opportunity from that learning rather than focusing on the failure.
No, I love that. I think that trust is. And so for me, kind of like servant leadership is a massive part of that, because for me, servant leadership is, in its most basic terms, is leaders getting out of the way of their individuals and allowing them to grow. And leaders, their main focus is the people rather than their projects or whatever else. But that trust and empowerment to say, I believe in you, you should go on and do it, and you should challenge me as a leader or anybody in the leadership if it's not the right thing, and then get that feedback back is a very, very powerful thing. I haven't seen it really done well in most companies, at least in my personal experience, but I know it, it can be done. The one book I would highly recommend, by the way, is Tim Clark's 4 Stages of Psychological Safety. Brilliant book. Was really, really helped me to think about what psychological safety was.
Well,
Tim Clark's 4
Stages of Psychological Safety, Timothy Clark.
All right, thank you.
Maybe we can add it to the message board so that people can look it up later. Something that, besides everything that they've added, I completely agree on everything. And I wanted to address one of the questions that someone made at the beginning of the session, saying, does that change between countries? Like, does that sense of, the psychological safety, they use a different word, but it came down to that, change depending on the country? And I think it absolutely does. There are some countries that are more, let's say, have more of a mentality that you cannot make mistakes, particularly if you're the boss. Like, let's think more like the Japanese culture is more like that type. And then you move on to Anglo-Saxon cultures. You have different cultures for different companies, but overall, that is more allowed. Like, you learn when you make mistakes, you're supposed to learn, and that's part of the learning experience. So I think it absolutely does change. And those situations, the cultural settings limit or sort of like set some boundaries to how much of a learning organization you can create. In some cases you might be able to go faster, in some cases you might have to go slower, so you can do this much or you can do that much. And I think it's something you have to work with. It's very difficult to work outside of the culture of a country. Sorry.
I think the interesting aspect with Marion, you talked about kind of how do you train in psychological safety. I was at a conference a couple of weeks ago, and they talked about DEI and about how you can't really train in DEI. It has to be kind of something that's just embedded in as part of the way you turn up with each other and how you're honest. And for me, the two are very linked. You need psychological safety to do almost everything from well-being to DEI to training to everything. So I think for me, if somebody asked me, how do I train psychological safety? It would be a struggle, because you kind of like, how do you train somebody to say the thing, do the things that Vanessa and Pasha have said quite rightly. It's a, you're talking about somebody's almost DNA of kind of who they are. It's a very hard thing to do, to just say, yeah, right, we want psychological safe environment, let's train it out.
Great. I can see some future topics for next webinars. Joey, let's take some note. I'd like to follow up on that. And Toby, you've mentioned a few minutes ago the topic of servant leadership, and that was also another comment from the chat, that we need a leadership buy-in. So who would like to pick it up? Maybe you, Vanessa. What role do managers and leaders play in creating a learning culture? What should they do and don't do? What are do's and don'ts for leaders to enable learning?
I think that Toby and I will have different perspectives based on our approach, which is great because they're great. No, so
we're a psychologically safe bubble here. So
exactly. So I would say all of the different aspects I mentioned earlier, like for me, the culture of an organization, even though I completely agree with Toby that it's a person's responsibility and it is in their best interest to have a learning mindset. So it's us ourselves that should, force ourselves to have that mindset. But lots of people are not there yet. And particularly, I think even if you are there, you might be limited as well to the extent in which you can learn, or you can reflect that learning, or use the organization as a learning environment if your leadership doesn't go with you, if the culture of the company is not fostering that. And as I was mentioning, the culture of a company is top down. So the leaders play an absolutely key role with that. They play a key role on creating this psychological safety environment. They play a key role, I was saying, in communicating how important and how relevant and why you have to create, you need to have this learning and growth mindset. And I think third, they also are the ones that make the decisions and control the resources. So something we didn't discuss earlier is that in order to create a learning culture, if you have the intention of creating a learning culture, you have to dedicate the resources. And that's people, and that's also money, because in order to have good enough training materials, good enough, training materials, so training platform or personnel or whatever, you need always resources. So I think that the role of the leader is absolutely fundamental.
And that resources is time as well. It's kind of that focus to say, this is our priority and we believe in our values and this is something we need to do. I mean, you're absolutely right, Vanessa, because you can, if you have individuals or even teams at, say, the lower levels creating these very great bubbles of psychological safety and culture, of learning culture, then that will grow and they'll be successful. What a lot of companies tend to do is then go, oh, that team's doing well, let's just replicate that everywhere else. And that doesn't quite happen. And if you don't get, like you said, the leaders on board, the middle management, and especially the leadership, you just start getting silos and you start getting individual teams going, well, we'll just do it this way and we'll carry on. And that team's not going to collaborate with us, so we won't bother with them. And eventually you'll just start losing people because people will say, well, this is not working for me and I'm going to go and find a culture that is best. And I think Vanessa and Pash, I think you'll know better than I will, that people nowadays are looking for companies with the right culture. It's no longer just a role that's the tick done. It's now the questions are coming out from employees or prospective employees of what culture do you have? How do you work? Not just what do you work?
I think a good point there, Toby, and Josh Bersin, he wrote an article on how to build an effective learning culture. And he says that culture is hard, not soft. So it's not the touchy-feely things that, some people think they are. They actually
all the round of applause at the end of a session or something. Yeah.
And it's just, he says that it's a set of behaviors from your leaders. So it goes back to the leader, Vanessa, you mentioned, what do they do when things fail? How do they respond, when people deliver bad news? What sort of example are they, setting from that psychological safety perspective so that, people learn from failure and learn from mistakes as well. So I think that's a good one. I know that, Marion, we were going to come on to measures of success around learning culture, but
I was about to ask that, right? It's all fun and games and learning until someone says, well, it actually costs money. So how do you know we are actually successful? What are the measures?
I think, learning culture needs to be very business relevant and not just something, that you get happy sheets at the end. So what needs to happen is that, it is always hard to correlate the learning, directed to business growth, but we need to be more use hard evidence to actually show that our learning is contributing to bottom line as well. So we need to be evidence-based. We need to use data that we have available to us to make sure that that happens. So, there's things like sentiment surveys that we can send out, but it's all about that leadership style as well and getting that continuous conversation going. So, some measures there.
Right. It's a bit frustrating for me, but I'll have to wrap it up. We have some 20 seconds left. It was a pleasure to have you, Pash, Toby, Vanessa. Looking forward to our next event. Thank you for all the questions that we have for our participants. Thank you to our unsung heroes, Joey, Mariana, our team in the background that just made this happen for us. Wish you a lot of fun at the event and looking forward to the next session myself.
Thank you all. It was fantastic.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for joining, everyone.
Enjoy, guys.
Bye-bye.
Have fun.